We've got a charged atmosphere for two rivals in the East Division. It's the Moonshine Throwdown, Marshall and Western Kentucky.
It's intercepted by Key, and Key has one man to beat. A nice cut move. Edwards can't get him. Key takes it all the way. A pick six for Devin Key.
There goes Key. Splits the defenders and he's gone. 65 yards, he completes it with a somersault.
So please join me in welcoming the 21st head coach in WKU football history, Tyson Helton.
And Marshall's going to finish the year 9-4 and champions of the 2018 Gasparilla Bowl, the sixth consecutive bowl win for the Marshall Thundering Herd.
Welcome to the Moonshine Throwdown podcast. The series of position group breakdowns continues this week with the offensive lineman trace. I kind of bummed out that Steven couldn't join us this week, but schedules just could not line out this week. So I'm going to cover the toppers this week. Steven had sent me some notes and some thoughts, so we'll get some things directly kind of from Steven's head regarding the tops, but it's you and I tonight. So before we get going, let's tell everybody where they can find us. Find us on Twitter at MSTD_podcast to follow the podcast account. And of course the main rivalry account at Moonshine TD. The podcast can be found anywhere. I don't really feel the need to list every single place now when you can just go to Spotify or iHeartRadio or iTunes or Google Podcast and probably find the darn thing. Everybody's got at least iHeartRadio or Spotify downloaded on their phone, I would like to think. And if you don't, you've got iTunes or Google Play. So we can be found. So let's get into it, Trace. Let's talk offensive linemen this week. I think since Steven's not here and in an effort to keep you from sitting there for 15 minutes or so quiet, we're going to start in Huntington this week, and we're going to start with the Herd. So let's talk about that. Marshall offensive line should be a really, really big strength for this team. A lot of career starts. Phil still ranks this unit as number 2 in the Conference USA, but wait, national ranking of number 44. We'll talk about some projected starters as always, as Phil still sees it. Now, this may, of course, be different by the time week 1 rolls around. We don't really know. But, he's got a little bit more inside info than we do. He gets to talk to the coaches and everybody. So we're going to go with what he says. And we'll talk about some guys that'll be quick to come in for the rotation and things like that, just like we always try to do. And then I'm going to get your answers to those key questions that I always like to ask. So, Trace, let's talk about the unit. Give me some, let's call it housekeeping things, changes. I know there were some departures. Anything general that you want to talk about real quick before we head into the projected starting 5?
Yeah, I think this unit's going to be a really big strength for the Herd this year. Some people can make the argument that heading into the season, you could make the argument that it is the biggest strength of the team heading into the season. You can make that argument, I feel like. Looking at this field still preview closer, this unit jumps to 111 career starts. Jordan Dowry, the biggest loss from the unit from last year, he was just an Iron Man. The guy just played constantly. He's probably one of the, I would say, I don't know if longest tenured players is the best word or best phrase, but he was just an Iron Man. He played so much football for Marshall from day one on until the end. So I'm really excited about this unit. Greg Atkins' second year now at the helm of the line. I expect really good things from him again, leading this unit. I could see this unit being arguably the best in Conference USA. It really depends on how one newcomer in particular, I'm really excited to see him, which we'll hit on more later. But, yeah, I think this is going to be a really good year for the O-line.
Yeah, I think that really goes without saying. There is a lot of experience on this offensive line, a lot of – this is a veteran line. Let's just call it like it is. You go down that projected starting 5, and whether they've played a lot of football for Marshall, most of them have, obviously, but one man particularly you alluded to has still played a lot of football. You go down that starting five as Phil still projects it, and it's junior, senior, junior. I mean, that's a lot of game time. It's a lot of reps. So let's talk about it. First, newcomer right off the bat. Projected starter at left tackle, Josh Ball, the JUCO transfer, Florida State, former Florida Stater, freshman, started 9 games there for the Seminoles. Comes to the herd here, listed 6'8", 350 pounds. Good luck moving that guy. Left guard, Will Ulmer. Love Will Ulmer. Great guy to follow on social media, by the way. Seems like he's just loving life. It seems like it's all country music and football with Will Ulmer. I really like that dude. 6'5", 300-pound junior. 13 starts at left tackle last year. So maybe moving him a little bit moving him in one there to the guard spot, perhaps. Center, Levi Brown. I mean, what can you say that hasn't been said about Levi Brown, the 6'4", 284-pound senior? I mean, 13 starts last year, Remington Award preseason watch list, first team all conference last year, first team preseason all conference by the Conference USA coaches, and first team Phil Steele all conference team. On top of all that, Phil grades him as the number 16 draft eligible center this season. I mean, I don't know what else you can say about Levi Brown. He's an all-timer, and he's still got one more year to play. So, moving on there, right guard Kane Madden, third team preseason Phil Steele all-conference team, 6'3", 338-pound junior. 9 starts in 13 games last year. Stepped in when Alex Millette went down with the injury in the Moonshine Throwdown, and helped that offensive line bump up the rush yards per game. I believe was noted in the little paragraph there where Phil still talks about the offensive line for the herd. Said they were averaging, let me look it up real quick, 140 yards per game. And then when Kane Madden came in, they improved all the way to 192 yards a game. I mean, that's pretty big leap. So rounding out the starting five there, right tackle Tarek Adams, 6'3", 307-pound junior, 12 starts in 12 games last year. Lot of experience. Now, the one thing I did do, of course, I love doing this when you talk offensive line. I went down the starting five, average height and weight for the line, 6'4", 315 pounds. I mean, that's nothing to sneeze at, That's a really, really good sized offensive line. So talk to me about those starters. Then we'll talk about the guys coming off the bench for the rotation.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that point right there about the average weight, because that was something I was just thinking in my head, that looking down this list, I feel like this is going to be one of Marshall's biggest lines in a long time. I feel like it, just by the sheer, just the size and the numbers and stuff, it looks like this is going to be a really big, literally and figuratively, offensive line this year.
Yeah.
I mean, 315 or so pounds per man. I mean, that's pretty big. I mean, even in the past when Marshall's had really good lines, I feel like most of them have been a little bit more undersized. Like, not that was a bad thing, because they had some great lines, but I feel like not a lot of them were that typical 320 kind of pounders. Now you got a bunch of those guys. I mean, yeah, I think the difference is that, yeah, they're big and they're kind of like immovable objects at times, but at the same time, they're pretty athletic guys. I mean, they can move around pretty good. Levi Brown, I mean, he's been one of the best linemen definitely of all time in Marshall history. I mean, he's been right up there with anybody you want to look at, I feel like. So I think barring any, injury, he'll be a first team all conference guy again. A lot of other guys could creep into that all conference kind of caliber seasons, and newcomer, especially Josh Ball, could really, really break out big time. But yeah, I mean, it's going to be tough to block these guys. They're not block. It's going to be tough to get past these guys. And it's going to be tough to get to the quarterback. And, I think they're going to open up some really good running lanes. They haven't had a massive season in terms of rushing yards since probably 2014. I feel like I don't think they're going to get to that level this year, because they're, but I think it will probably be, I feel like they could easily average at least 200 yards rushing a game. I mean, they were close to it last year, so I think they'll be there this year. So
yeah. They were right there last year. You're right. I mean, look, 6'4", 315 pounds. Your lightest guy across this projected five is Levi Brown at 284 pounds, and he's a first-team all-conference player. So, Look, I mean, it is what it is. This is just going to be flat out, you can't say it enough, the you're right, might be the most important, best unit on this team. And, anybody that knows football, like legitimately knows football, knows that it starts with the offensive line. If you don't have an offensive line, nothing you want to do offensively will work. So, you got to see a lot of offensive success, I would think, for the Herd this year based on, what we know about this offensive line. So let's talk about some guys that you might see. I got 5 guys here. If you want to talk about somebody else, that's fine too. 5 guys I jotted down that you might see coming off of into the rotation there fairly quickly. Alex Seguero, 6'3", 317-pound junior. I mean, I wrote down Alex Millette. I really don't know how his rehab is coming along. I don't know if he's good to go. I don't know, if he's going to be out any longer, but, he went down there at the tail end of the Moonshine Throwdown. So what are we like? I don't know, 10 months-ish away from that injury. And, I don't know if he's good to go or if he's still got a little rehabbing to do, but I would like to think at some point you're going to see him. And being that he was a starter last year, you would like to think that he's going to be one of the first in the rotation this year. The 6'3", 290-pound junior, like I said, 4 starts at right guard last year. Dalton Tucker, 6'6", 307-pound redshirt freshman. Sean Barron's a 6'3", 302-pound junior. I'd like to see Sean get on the field a little bit. He's had a rough go of it. Couple season-ending type injuries. I believe it was a shoulder once, and then I can't remember something else that kept him. It's just kept him on the shelf, man. I'd like to see him get an opportunity to get some downs. And then Zach Ferris, the 6'5", 318-pound redshirt freshman. So there's a little bit of experience coming off of the bench. One former starter that could actually be the day one starter. I don't know. We don't know. Alex Millette could be, your week 1 starter. Thoughts about the rotation? Still a lot of good size. I didn't do an average height of weight of the guys I wrote down there, but it looks like it would be somewhere in the 6'3.5", right around 305-pound range. So it's not like you're losing a lot when those second unit guys start coming in. So overall general thoughts, aside from it being a huge asset with a lot of talent this year?
Yeah, I mean, I think they got a lot of options back there, waiting in the wings, trying to come in and provide depth and, rotation guys. And it's going to be really interesting to see what Millette has this year, what kind of factor he has. I mean, if he can come in and, recover from the injury, assuming that he will recover from the injury, if he can come in and look like he did last year as like a starter, that would be a big time plus for Marshall. Because, I mean, yeah, their offensive line, the starting 5, the projected starting 5's got a lot of talent. There's no doubt about that. But then some of those rotation guys, some of the guys, waiting on the bench, so to speak, I feel like they're a little bit unproven, a lot of them. So like if Millette could come in there and, he's not really unproven. He's proved quite a bit the last couple of years. So if he could come in as the next guy off the bench, then that would be awesome. I mean, I feel like that would be a huge addition for the line. I mean, assuming he comes back. I mean, you never know after an injury how a player's going to be, but other guys, young guys, they always have to step up, and the offensive line's no exception. It's every unit, but the line's no exception too. So I feel like they have solid enough depth. Some of it's unproven, but we'll see how it goes.
All right, so let's talk about those questions that we have been keying into every episode. How about the toughest player to replace from the departures off the unit this past season?
Yeah, I think it's Jordan Dowry. I mean, when a guy starts basically for 4 straight years, yes. I mean, there was very few games in those 4 years in which he didn't start, if any, to be honest. So I feel like that's going to be tough to replace just because, like I said, he was an Iron Man. I mean, he was just a rock solid, just a, great guy to have out there on the line. Great, work ethic, great leadership qualities, and all the stuff that you would want in a lineman. He had it. So he's going to be tough to replace. But even though they're losing a 4-year starter, I actually think this offensive line this year is probably going to be more talented than it was last year. And we'll kind of touch on that a little bit more here coming up. But yeah, I'd say Dowry's probably the toughest to replace. I mean, anytime you lose a 4-year starter, there's always questions surrounding his replacement.
Yeah, there's no doubt in my mind as well. It's got to be Jordan Dowry, but we should note that the Herd lost several other offensive linemen. I don't know if did we mention them earlier? I can't remember if we did, but Alex Locklear to graduate transfer. Three or two or three younger guys transferred out and went to other schools. So the depth took a little bit of a ding, but you still got to be excited about this unit if you're a Herd fan. How about the one you're most excited to see?
Yeah, I think I'm going to go with Josh Ball for that. I mean, I'm 6'8", 350 pounds. I mean, what else needs to be said? I mean, who doesn't want to see what a 6'8", 350 pound man can do on the offensive line? I mean, It's going to be crazy to see like how much taller he is than everybody else, and just how much bigger he looks than everybody else. So I feel like if he lives up to what, as a really pretty high recruit, a pretty highly talented player that was at Florida State. So if he can live up to that potential like he was doing a couple years ago, the off the field stuff's not I'm going to get into that, but if he can, stay on the right path as far as all that goes and live up to his potential, then I'm really excited to see what he can do in 2 years. So I'm definitely most excited to see Josh Ball. It's going to be kind of like the immovable object, irresistible force meets the immovable object. So let's see it.
Yeah, I'm with you. It's pretty crazy. I mean, it's not like he just was on the roster at Florida State. It's a 9-game starter as a freshman. Yeah. So kind of excited to see what he's going to do to Conference USA defensive linemen and linebackers. So how about your breakout player on the offensive line for 2019?
Yeah, I'm going to have a repeat. I'm going to go with Josh Ball again. It's just because I really haven't seen him, so I don't know what to expect. I mean, I haven't watched any of his stuff from Florida State. I haven't watched anything he's done, so I really don't know what to expect. I don't know what his tendencies are as a lineman. So I think he has a really, really great chance to be a breakout player. I mean, he could break out to the point where he's almost like a first or second team all conference caliber player. So I feel like he's got that kind of potential just based on the measurables alone. So I'm going to go with Josh Ball again. I'm doubling down.
All right. Well, I've got a sneaking feeling that it won't be a trifecta here, but it could be. Who's your MVP for the 2019 season on the offensive line?
No, it's not a trifecta. My MVP is Levi Brown. I think that pretty much goes without saying. I mean, he's just a superstar. He's the guy that he's one of the main probably 2 or 3 faces of Marshall football right now, I would say.
Yeah.
He's right there. I mean, he was one of the 2 players they had at Media Day, Conference USA Media Day, along with Chris Jackson, really just rock solid player. I mean, he's been absolutely sensational for several years now. He's absolutely stepped up and into being arguably the best, lineman / center in the conference. I mean, I really think he's that good. And I think he definitely has an NFL future in store, as you alluded to earlier with Phil Steele's rankings of, the centers and everything. So I think Levi Brown, like I said earlier, unless he's injured or, whatever, barring any of that stuff, he's going to be a first-team all-conference guy again. It's just going to be crazy to see as a senior, especially now too, with more experience around him with other guys and more talent around him. I feel like he's going to have a monster year. So Levi Brown MVP.
So let me ask you a question about Levi Brown. Is there a guy in college football that has more fun playing football? I mean, every week it's like a different video surfaces of something that he did on the field. It was the Conor McGregor strut, and then it was the Stone Cold Steve Austin with the water bottles and all. I mean, what a guy. What a guy. Living his best life in Kelly green and white. I mean, you just can't beat it. All right. Here's where the rubber meets the road, Trace. I'm going to need a hot take from you for the offensive line.
Oh boy. Okay, offensive line hot take. This might be a kind of a two-parter, but I'm going to start with just this. I think that they're going to allow the least amount of sacks in all of Conference USA, of any line in Conference USA. That's not that big of a hot take because they were fourth. I think they were fourth in the country 2 years ago in sacks allowed. So they only allowed 11. So it really wouldn't be that big of a stretch to think that. But I think they will allow the least amount of sacks in Conference USA. And I think that they will open up running lanes for the most rushing yards per game that Marshall has averaged since 2014, since they had that huge year with Devin Johnson and all those guys. I think this is going to be the most, which that's going to kind of tie into the running backs too, obviously, but the line creates most of that with hold and stuff. So I think that's kind of a two-part hot take. I feel like they can easily achieve both of those.
Okay, most team rushing yards per game since 2014. I like that. That's a nice team oriented type hot take. I like that. Usually it's kind of directed at someone else or sort of.
Yeah, it's been for me.
Yeah, but that's all right. I like that. That's good. So Herd fans, if you're not pumped up about your offensive line, then you need to get pumped up about your offensive line. Yep. They are the key cog that makes the Herd offense go. And then after that, it's all about execution and play calling and that sort of thing. But none of it works unless this offensive line is working the way they should. And by all accounts, you've got one of the strongest ones in the conference and the entire, G5, which, me, I hate that term, but, 44th nationally, that says something. So doesn't come around very often. Relish in it. So hopefully the success translates on the field. So hang with us on the other side of this break. We're going to talk topper offensive line. It's the Moonshine Throwdown podcast.
1st and 25 now. Green rolling out. And intercepted. Deflected and taken away by DeAndre Ferris. Ferris with a convoy. Ferris inside the 20-yard line. Western Kentucky responds.
All right, it's time to head down Bowling Green, Kentucky. We're talking Western Kentucky Hilltopper offensive lineman. I'm filling in for Steven this week. We just couldn't get our schedules to line out so that he could join us tonight on this podcast. So I'm going to do my absolute very, very best to fill you in. Maybe Trace can take a little bit of the heat off of me at times. We'll see. Steven was nice enough to give me those answers to those questions at the end of each segment. So when we talk about that will be straight from him. But let's get into it. Western Kentucky offensive lineman Phil Steele ranks this unit tied for 6th in the Conference USA with Louisiana Tech, right down the middle. So, okay. Toppers return all 5 starters, plus they get back starting left tackle Cole Spencer from last year, who went down after 3 games and ended up redshirting. So, all 5 starters return, plus you get essentially a 6th starter, which is basically kind of like what the Herd's got going on, with Alex Millette potentially coming back. 78 career starts along this offensive line, which was something that was a really, really low number heading into last season. It was like 18 career starts or something like that. So now there is a whole bunch of experience and downs played along this unit. I have been outspoken numerous times that I think this unit and the secondary are the 2 strengths of this Western Kentucky Hilltopper football team for 2019. And just like we were saying with the Herd, it all predicates on the offensive line. If they are putting together good games, then by and large, the offense is able to execute, and we see yards and points. So this will be a real strength. We should see an improvement offensively for Western Kentucky, and it's going to be in large part due to the experience and the returning playmaking ability of these offensive linemen. So let's talk about those projected starters. Left tackle, Cole Spencer, 6'4", 290-pound sophomore. Like I said earlier, 3 games in 2018 before he went down with injury and ultimately redshirted. Left guard Tyler Witt, 6'2", 305-pound junior, 13 games, 12 starts last year. I really like what Tyler Witt's all about. Really a gritty type player, type of guy you like having on your team. So look for improved playability. Good gracious, listen to me. Improved playmaking this year. Center Seth Jost, 6'2", 300-pound junior, 12 starts last year. Remington preseason award watch list along with Levi Brown. I mean, hey, we got 2 of the best in the conference in this rivalry. Right guard Jordan Meredith, the 6'2", 300-pound junior, 12 starts last year. And then right tackle Miles Pate seems to be getting the majority of the pub for the topper offensive line in the offseason here. 6'2", 315-pound senior, 12 starts last year, 2nd team all-conference last year. And he's on Phil Steele's preseason all-conference team, 2nd team as well. And I believe he was one of those Feldman's 40 freaks or 50 freaks of college football. So, man, Topper's getting it done. I mean, geez, it got one on the defensive line, one on the offensive line. I mean, what can we say? A lot of talent here, a lot of downs played here. Going to be a real strength. I said, we touched on it as we were podcasting at the end of last season or towards the middle end of last season that these guys had really turned a corner and it really looked like they were coming into their own as a unit. That kind of 5 guys, 1 mind kind of thing that, is the mantra of so many offensive line coaches. And now this season, we should really see the fruits of that. Taking it to the next step, having a complete off season, another year in the weight room, bigger and better, faster, stronger. I mean, I think Topper fans are going to be pleasantly happy with the improvement in A, the run game alone, and B, pass protection. Because let's face it, right now we don't know who quarterback's going to be in Bowling Green. So at least we know whoever it will be, they will be taken care of. So average across that line, Trace, a little bit smaller than the herd, but as you alluded to earlier, some of Marshall's better lines have been those smaller, more athletic type lines. So 6'2.5", 302 pounds. So talk to me. I mean, I know you don't know too much in depth about these guys, but you can still speak to that type, that sizing of line and what it can do for you. So let's talk about that a little bit if you don't care. Give me some thoughts on what this Topper line looks like to you from the other side of the ball.
Yeah, I mean, well, when you return all 5 starters, you got to have optimism alone just by that. I mean, when you return all of your guys, I mean, you got to think they're going to be better and more improved. And, as you said, they kind of started catching on last year towards the end, middle of the year, whatever. So I feel like that's definitely going to pay dividends this year for them. I mean, looking at it, looking at the smaller line, quote unquote smaller, not that 300 pounds is small,
right.
But
yeah, right.
looking at the smaller lineman thing, thinking back to, I keep talking this whole episode about the 2014 Marshall offensive line. That line wasn't overly huge. I mean, they had some, they had Clint Van Horn, some guys out there that were big boys, but not all of them were like 330 pounds. They had several guys under 300. Chris Jaspers, I feel like he was probably 300 or under. I feel like a couple – Selby might have been under 300. They had a couple guys on that line, more than a couple, that were under 300 pounds. If you're under the 300-pound mark, that usually lends itself to being a little more athletic than some of those guys that are 330 or 320. No, I mean, now it doesn't always work that way, but, I mean, it's hard – sometimes it's hard to find a nice blend between the immovable object, just huge – monstrous guys, and then the athletic guys. It's hard to kind of find a blend, but I feel like they kind of have a little bit of that, and Marshall does too. So I think that's going to be good for both teams.
No, I think this goes without question to saying that they have that blend here along this line. And look, yes, we keep saying smaller, but look, it's over 3 bills, okay? It's not small. That's why I keep saying more athletic.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, hey, a 300-pounder that can move, is there really any difference between a 300-pounder and a 310-pounder? Yeah, 10 pounds. But you're still moving. So, I mean, what's the difference? Jeez.
But 290 pounds. That's huge, too.
Yeah. I mean, there's nothing small about this line, but in relative, inches and pounds, they're just a tad smaller than the average size of the herd 5. No big deal. But yes, we saw quite a bit of improvement as the season went on. Last year they were, sophomores majority, and now they're, juniors. I mean, these guys are leaders. All 5 of these guys, I feel like, are going to be like tone setters. If that's a decent term to use, these would be tone setters for the offense, I feel like. So let's talk about some guys that are going to come off and hit that rotation quite quickly, or when needed, not necessarily quickly. First off is Parker Howell. He's the guy that started 10 games, appeared in 10 games, had 9 starts last year when Cole Spencer went down. So Parker Howell, 6'4", 290-pound senior. So right off the bat, you've got a senior with all that experience ready to step in there and plug a hole. Preston Mixon, the 6'4", 290-pound sophomore, appeared in a couple of games last year. Then it's a little bit of a youth movement, Trace. You got Mason Brooks, the 6'6", 275-pound sophomore. I mean, Rusty, I hope I say his name right. I don't know if it's Stats or States. Sorry. 6'4", 310-pound redshirt freshman. And then Gunnar Britton, the 6'6", 295-pound redshirt freshman. So it's a little senior. Then we get a little bit younger as we go down into that rotation, which kind of is par for the course for most offensive lines. But look, I don't care how you slice it. And based on Steven's hot take, should be a little bit telling. I mean, I really do think these offensive numbers are going to be pumped up quite a bit from what you saw last year and the year before that, quite honestly. But yeah, I think the Toppers are going to be treated to a little bit more of that exciting brand of football, and a big reason of that is going to be this offensive line. Personally, I feel like between Seth Jost and Levi Brown, we've got the two best centers in the conference. Just my opinion.
Don't add us.
Yeah, don't. I mean, you can at me if you want. It doesn't make you right.
Right.
I feel like I'm right. You know, and also, I mean, I don't know, 10, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 deep, basically, before you start having to hit that youth movement in a big way. I mean, that's a pretty good problem to have. You know, you might like to have 9 or 10 guys with some real legit experience, but hey, 7, 8 guys ain't that bad. You know, if you start hitting the injury bug pretty bad, then things can go south kind of quick, but that you can say that about anybody. So this next part here, we're going to talk about are the questions, the toughest to replace, you know, all that stuff. This is straight from Steven. So these are, you know, the resident Topper fanatics opinions for these next series of questions. The toughest to replace, of course, none. They didn't lose anybody. So what a great problem to have. Yeah, I didn't even think about that until I'm, you know, asking him to send me the answers to these. And he's like, yeah, we don't have anybody to replace. So I'm like, all right, well, that's great. Most excited to see, Steve says he's most excited to see Seth Jost, the preseason Remington award watch list. Steven uses the word anchor. He calls him the anchor of this offensive line, which is a term. I mean, that's like a rite of passage type thing to me. I mean, if you're the anchor of a unit, I don't know that there's much higher praise than that. If you're the guy. So, breakout player. Steve says he thinks the breakout player can be Cole Spencer, who of course was the starter last year, down after 3 games, redshirted. So, you know, he's got some experience, but he's basically poised to bust out in a huge way. MVP, Steve thinks, will be Miles Pate, the athletic machine, so to speak, the one who's getting all the preseason pub. Look out for this dude at right tackle. I'm not sure he's going to be letting too many people past him. I don't think he's not letting anyone past him. I'll say I don't think too many people are going to get past him. Now, here's the interesting one to me. I asked Steven for a hot take, and you saw this hot take, Trace, before.
I saw it.
And this is the hottest of hot takes that we've had of all position group breakdowns so far this season. And I'm going to go ahead and say that this, at the end of the series, this might be the hottest of takes because of what we saw from last year and you know, during the Mike Sanford era. I'll put it that way. So Steven's got 2 for me. He says the offensive line will allow less than 2 sacks per game, which is not a super hot, fiery take. Okay. I mean, that's respectable. That's a show of respect and a showing of the amount of talent he thinks that they have there. But here's the one. He says that the offensive line will allow a Topper running back to average over 100 yards per game all season long. Now, this from a team that had it took like 21 games into the Mike Sanford era for a running back to reach 100 yards. That's why this take is so freaking hot. Okay. because you think about that. Like, you can almost screw up and bust a big run and get to 100 yards, but it just never seemed to happen. And it took 20-some games for that to happen. Now Steven thinks the offensive line is such a benefit and the talent is there in the backfield that now a running back can average over 100 yards per game all season long. And when you think about that kind of stuff, now you see why that's such a hot take. Now, that's one I just got to step back and I got to play wait and see on that. I'm not saying it won't happen. I'm just saying, wow, that's something I've got to see. All right, so let's digest all of that info and talk about all these. Been talking about all the guys up front. Been a lot. I mean, it's a good thing these guys don't have to block each other because it might just be Hut and then everybody stands still.
Nobody's moving
because nobody can move anybody else. But anyway, let's talk about some final thoughts, Trace, and then we'll get the heck out of here for this episode and, move along till next week. So what you got? Final thoughts?
Yeah, I'll start my final thoughts by saying I think my Chris Jackson with 7 interceptions hot take might be a hotter take than what Stevens just had right there. It's arguable. It's arguable. But no, on a serious note, I'm looking forward to Marshall offensive line this year. I mean, it goes without saying, I think it's going to be a huge strength. And looking down the roster, I didn't really mention this earlier, but I think the really good thing is if this season turned out to be a kind of breakthrough season for the O-line, then that's going to be really good for next year because they only have one senior in the starting 5 right now. So they're going to have most of those guys back. Josh Balls will be back. Tarek Adams, Ulmer, Madden, all those guys are projected to be back next year, barring any crazy stuff. But yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be awesome to see it this year. I think they're going to, like I said, lead Conference USA in the least amount of sacks given up. And then I think they're going to have their best season in terms of opening up running lanes in 5 years. I mean, that's been a long time. Ever since that 2014 season, the line's obviously not quite reached that level, obviously, because that's probably like the best single season rushing yards per game that they've maybe ever had that year. And most of that could be attributed to the line and Devin Johnson, of course. But I think they're going to have a season not to that extent, but I feel like it will be at least 200-plus yards per game. I mean, that season they averaged probably 200. It was at least 280 yards rushing per game that year.
Well, Devin Johnson had like 1,800 yards or something like that.
He had, yes. He had like he had over 1,700 yards. He averaged over 8 yards a carry. I mean, just an absolute monster season. So I think the line's going to have something to say about that season. They're going to make you kind of think, well, maybe this is the season that they, can get back to that level. But I don't think they'll quite be at that level, but they'll be relatively closer than they've been in the last 5 years. So that's where I am with the line right now.
Well, that 2014 season is such a watermark for so many,
it is.
Positions and stats. And I mean, that's what you go back and compare to because the offense was so explosive and the defense was so damn stingy. I mean, there's so many things except, but the offense was still potent that game. It's just,
was it ever?
Cato threw it to the wrong team 4 times to get things going right off the bat, but no big, it is what it is. I'm going to say I'm a football guy. Like, I'm a purist and I can appreciate really good offensive line play. And I don't care if it results in a game that's 3-0 or 6-3, because I can get caught up in the game within the game, so I enjoy watching good offensive line play. And on the other side of that coin, I loathe having to sit through terrible offensive line play because it's frustrating if it's your team because you can't do anything all game long. So that being said, I'm really excited to see how these units perform this year. I'm really excited to see some of these guys, actually all of these guys, take the next step and take their games to the next level. I'm really excited to see how these the game within the game for our purposes. I'm like super stoked right now, and it's not even till freaking October to see how the Herd offensive line matches up with this Western Kentucky defensive line and vice versa. because these games, by and large, if you take out the 2016 game, these games have been pretty competitive games. I mean, even when, 2014, 67-66, I mean, it's still competitive. You settled by 1 point. 2015, the game is 49-28. It's a little bit, of a blowout there, but you've got Brandon Dowdy and Cruz, all seniors, and then Chase Litt, the freshman. Yeah. And then you got 2016 where the wheels came off for the Herd. So that's 2017 was a very competitive game. It was like 30-23 or something like that. And that was the Sacred Saturday game in Huntington. And then 2018, it took Ryan B to get a strip sack in the last second of the game to secure that win. Or else, for all we know, Stephen Duncan's going to hit Mike Wandine or something in the end zone and give the lead to the Toppers with under a minute to go. So that game within the game, these offensive line versus the defensive line for Marshall and Western Kentucky, I'm already excited to see how they stack up with one another. So I don't know. So you guys got to join us next week, though. Next week, we're going to get into probably more of what the casual fan likes to talk about, and that's these quote unquote, another term that I hate, right? What are they? Skill position players, as if every position on a football team doesn't require skill. Oh, it's just one of those things I hate. But anyway, we're talking running backs, and boy, are there a slew of talented running backs. You know a lot about these Herd running backs. Some of you know quite a bit about these Topper running backs, but there's some new faces in that program. So that ought to be a really good episode. I hope we can get schedules lined out to where everybody can be on the show, because I'm excited to see and hear what Stephen has to say. I know you've got tons of great information about the Herd. So be sure and come back next week. Find this podcast. You've got to subscribe so you don't miss an episode. I mean, we absolutely appreciate everybody that listens. We appreciate if you guys if you listen to an episode and it's like 3 or 4 days from the day we recorded or whatever, and you're just getting around to listening to it, and you want to tweet us about something, tweet Trace, tweet Steven, tweet me. We love that kind of stuff. I mean, we absolutely love interacting with our followers. Don't think, man, I didn't get to catch this for a day or two. It's too late to talk about it now. No, we love to talk about that stuff. So anyway, we'll catch you next week. We're going to get out of here. Trace, are you ready? Because I've got to go tops loaded up. We got to get the heck out of here. Here's hoping that Steven can get back next week. But, hey, 2 out of 3 ain't bad. So we'll see you next week. Until next week, go Tops. Trace.
Go Herd.
It is the Moonshine Throwdown podcast. We will see you next week. We're out. Later.